They called me blessed. The Emperor's light made flesh, a living miracle who turned the tide of battles with prayer and faith alone. I believed I was his instrument, incorruptible and pure, a symbol of hope in the darkness. I was wrong. This is not a tale of redemption or glory. This is the story of how a saint of the Imperium learned that grace is not armor against corruption, and that even the holiest can be broken. My name was Celestine. Once, the sky above Corellius Prime wept ash and burning promethium. I remember that detail with perfect clarity, even now, because it was the last thing I saw with mortal eyes before everything changed. The air tasted of sacred incense and charred flesh, a combination that had become familiar after 3 years fighting the Despoiler's forces across the shrine worlds of the sanctified Reach. I was Sister Celestine then, nothing more. A warrior of the Order of our Martyred Lady, distinguished perhaps by my devotion and skill with a blade, but still fundamentally human, still capable of fear and doubt and all the weaknesses that flesh is heir to. I led my squad through the ruins of the Cathedral of Eternal Vigilance. Our armor, the crimson and black of our order, our faith burning as hot as the bolt rounds in our weapons. The enemy had desecrated this holy place. Word-bearers, those traitorous priests of false gods, had raised profane symbols in the nave, where 10,000 pilgrims once gathered for prayer. They had written blasphemies in blood across altars consecrated to the god Emperor. The very stones screamed with corruption, the warp bleeding through reality in oily rainbows that hurt to perceive. My squad numbered 12 sisters, each a veteran of countless battles. Sister Agatha to my right, her flamer prepared to purge the unclean. Sister Mordred behind, heavy bolter tracking for targets. The others spread in perfect formation, our movements synchronized through years of training and shared faith. We advanced through the cathedral's broken transept, our battle hymns rising to drown out the demonic chanting that echoed from the corrupted altar. I remember thinking we would win. We always won, not through superiority of arms or numbers, but through the strength of our conviction. The Emperor protects. We believed this with every fiber of our being, and that belief made us dangerous beyond our physical capabilities. The pilgrims complicated everything. 300 civilians huddled in the cathedral's undercroft, trapped by the chaos assault, waiting for salvation that might never come. The word-bearers knew they were there, knew we would come for them. It was the perfect trap, and we walked into it with our eyes open because we had no choice. Faith demanded we protect the faithful, even unto death. I spoke the words of the Litany of Fury as we descended into the undercroft, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. The Emperor knows his own. The Emperor protects the faithful. The Emperor grants strength to those who serve. Simple words, but they carried weight in a universe where belief itself could reshape reality. The pilgrims wept when they saw us. Old men and women, children clutching prayer beads, priests in tattered vestments. They reached out with desperate hands as we formed a defensive perimeter around them. Some called me blessed already, though I had performed no miracles, simply arrived when they needed hope most desperately. The word-bearer champion emerged from the shadows like a nightmare given form. His armor was the deep crimson of arterial blood, decorated with scriptures that writhed and changed when I tried to read them. His helm bore 8 brass horns in mockery of sanctity. The axe in his hands screamed with the voices of everyone it had killed, a cacophony of suffering that threatened to shatter concentration. He called himself Apostle Malachar, and his voice was wrong, layered with harmonics that suggested multiple entities speaking in unison. He offered us a choice: surrender the pilgrims for corruption and live, or die defending those who would perish anyway. The warp always wins, he promised. Faith is merely slower death. I answered with my bolt pistol, the blessed rounds punching through his pauldron to detonate against the ceramite beneath. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming children. and charged. The battle lasted 7 minutes by the chronometer built into my armor's systems. 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours, each second stretching into eternity. My sisters fought with the fury of the righteous, but we were 12 against 40 corrupted Astartes who had fought and killed since before the Imperium's founding. The mathematics were not in our favor. Sister Agatha died first, her flamer torn from her hands before she could purge the enemy. Sister Mordred's heavy bolter ran dry, and she drew her chainsword for close combat, taking 3 traitors with her before they dragged her down. One by one, my sisters fell, each death a wound to my soul, each name a prayer I would carry forever. The pilgrims screamed behind us. Some prayed, some simply wept. A child, no more than 6 years old, clutched at my leg as I fought, her prayer beads digging into my armor. She whispered the litany of protection, her voice barely audible over the roar of battle, and I felt something stir within me. Not power, not yet, but the seed of what would come later. Malachar drove me back through sheer strength, his axe carving chunks from my armor with each blow. My blessed blade, sanctified by 100 battles, cracked under the assault. My left arm hung useless, shattered by a blow I had failed to fully parry. Blood filled my helmet, obscuring my vision with red haze. I thought of my mother then, dead 20 years in service to the Imperial Guard. I thought of my sister's superior who had trained me, who had given me purpose when I had none. I thought of the Emperor, distant and silent on his golden throne, and wondered if he truly watched as we bled for him. The blade entered my chest with surprising gentleness, almost tender in its precision. Malachar had aimed for the heart, and his aim was true. The pain was white-hot agony that drove all thought from my mind, all prayers from my lips. I felt my secondary heart stutter and fail, felt blood filling my lungs, felt my enhanced biology struggling to compensate for catastrophic trauma and failing. I fell to my knees, vision darkening at the edges. The pilgrim's prayers became distant echoes. The child was still clutching my leg, still whispering litanies, her faith absolute even as her protector died. Malachar raised his axe for the final blow, the killing stroke that would end my service and claim another soul for his dark gods. I prayed, not with words, for I had no breath for words, but with every remaining fragment of my consciousness. Emperor, protect them. Not me. Let me die, but save them. They believe in you. They have faith. Let that mean something. Let my death purchase their survival. The axe fell. I felt it bite into my neck, felt my spine sever, felt everything that I was begin to dissolve into darkness. And then I died. The darkness was not empty. I had expected peace or pain or simply cessation, but instead I found myself in a place between places, vast beyond comprehension, filled with light that burned and soothed simultaneously. I was aware of myself as a soul rather than a body, a flickering candle in an infinite storm. Voices called to me from the light. Millions of voices, billions perhaps, all praying, all believing, all screaming for salvation in the darkness of the far future. I recognized the words, the liturgies I had spoken my entire life, but hearing them from this perspective was overwhelming. Each prayer was a thread of light, each belief a tiny spark, and together they formed a web that stretched across the galaxy. And at the center of that web, something vast and terrible and incomprehensibly holy, the Emperor, or something that called itself the Emperor, or perhaps the collective faith of humanity given form and consciousness. I could not tell, could not distinguish between what was real and what was belief made manifest. The presence regarded me. If something so vast could be said to regard anything so small as a single soul. I felt judgment without words, assessment without mercy. I was weighed against some cosmic standard I could not comprehend, measured for worthiness I had never claimed. And I was found acceptable. The presence thrust me back into reality with force that shattered the boundaries between life and death. I felt my body reconstitute around my soul. Flesh and bone and augmented organs reformed from pure faith and warp energy. The pain was exquisite, every nerve ending screaming as it came into existence, every cell declaring its nature through agony. I opened my eyes to light. Not the dim emergency lumens of the undercroft, but radiance that poured from my own body like sunrise breaking over a world long held in darkness. My armor, shattered and bloodstained moments before, gleamed as if newly forged. The ardent shroud, it would be called later. But in that moment it was simply my skin, my protection, my identity, made manifest. Malachar staggered back, his 8 eyes widening in something that might have been fear. The word-bearers around him faltered, their chanting disrupted by the impossible sight of resurrection. The pilgrims fell to their knees, not in terror but in rapture, their prayers reaching a fever pitch that resonated in my bones. I rose, my blade, cracked and dulled by Malachar's axe, burned with new light. The ardent blade, though I did not know its name yet. It felt weightless in my hand, an extension of my will rather than a tool to be wielded. When I moved with speed and grace that transcended my previous capabilities, as if the very air yielded to my purpose. The word-bearers died quickly. I remember fragments of the slaughter, flashes of clarity between moments of overwhelming sensation. My blade passed through corrupted ceramite like parchment. My mere presence caused their lesser daemons to shriek and dissipate. Where I walked, the taint of chaos recoiled, reality reasserting itself in defiance of the warp's corruption. Malachar fought with desperate fury, channeling powers that should have ripped my soul from my body. But the light that surrounded me deflected his sorceries, turned his curses back upon him. When my blade finally took his head, it felt like justice rather than murder, like purification rather than execution. The battle ended. Silence fell over the undercroft, broken only by the sound of pilgrims weeping with joy and relief. I stood among the corpses of my enemies, my armor unmarked by the carnage, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not exhaustion, not even the satisfaction of vengeance. I felt hollow, as if my return had cost more than just the energy to resurrect my flesh. The child who had clutched my leg approached slowly, her prayer beads still gripped in tiny hands. She looked up at me with eyes too old for her face, eyes that had seen too much death and horror for one so young. She did not speak, simply reached out and touched my armor with one finger, as if testing whether I was real. I am real, I wanted to say. I am still Sister Celestine, still human, still one of you. But the words would not come because I was not certain they were true. They declared me a living saint within a week of Corellius Prime. The ecclesiarchy arrived with their proclamations and ceremonies, their incense and their rhetoric. Cardinals spoke of miracles and divine providence, of the emperor's will made manifest in mortal flesh. They were not entirely wrong, but they were not entirely right either. I did not feel holy. I felt different, changed in ways that went deeper than the obvious manifestations of power. Food tasted wrong now, as if my enhanced biology no longer processed it the same way. Sleep brought dreams that were not entirely my own. Visions of battles I had never fought and worlds I had never seen. When I looked in mirrors, my reflections seemed to lag slightly behind my movements, as if the light itself struggled to keep pace with what I had become. But the Imperium needed its saint. The Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade ground forward across the Cadian Gate, threatening to tear open the galaxy itself. Worlds burned, systems fell. Faith wavered in the face of such overwhelming darkness. I was to be the symbol that held the line, the living proof that the Emperor still watched over his children. I led my first crusade 3 months after my resurrection. The target was Meridian Fortress, a vital strategic position fallen to the Iron Warriors. My presence alone inspired 3 guard regiments and 2 companies of Space Marines to volunteer for what should have been a suicide mission. They looked at me with eyes full of desperate hope, and I could not bring myself to admit that I did not understand my own nature well enough to guarantee anything. We won, not through tactical brilliance or superior firepower, but through the simple fact that soldiers who believed they could not fail fought as if death had no meaning. I walked through fire that should have melted ceramite, and the flames parted. I raised my blade against a demon prince, and it fled before the light that surrounded me. Wounded men rose at my touch, their injuries closing as if they had never been. The victory celebration felt hollow. My sisters surrounded me with joy and reverence, but none would meet my eyes directly. They called me blessed, called me saint, called me every title except sister. I had become something other, set apart by grace or curse or both, and the isolation was more complete than any prison. The deaths began on Gamahal, a Xenos incursion. Drukhari raiders preying on an agri-world's population for their obscene pleasure. We arrived too late to save the first wave of victims, but in time to prevent total catastrophe. The battle was brief but vicious. Dark Eldar speed and cruelty against Imperial faith and fury. A dark Eldar Archon, his armor crackling with captured souls, drove his blade through my throat. I felt my windpipe sever, felt blood flood my lungs, felt consciousness slip away like water through grasping fingers. I died choking on my own blood, my last thought a prayer that someone would finish what I had started. And then I returned. The resurrection was different from the first. Faster, more violent, as if whatever power sustained me had grown impatient with my mortality. I woke mid-battle, my throat intact, my armor pristine, and threw myself back into combat without pause. The Archon's expression of shock was almost comical before my blade removed his head. We won again. But as my sisters cheered and the surviving civilians wept with gratitude, I noticed something wrong. I could not remember the name of the sister who had been fighting beside me when I fell. Could not recall the face of the guard captain who had coordinated our initial assault. Small details, easily dismissed as the confusion of battle, but they nagged at me with increasing insistence. The pattern repeated across a dozen worlds. I died to an Orc warboss on Ulthris 7, crushed beneath a power claw that reduced my torso to pulp. I died to a Tyranid warrior on Tempest, its claws opening my body from throat to groin. I died to a Chaos sorcerer on Malefica, my soul torn from my flesh by warp lightning that left my body a smoking husk. Each time I returned within seconds or minutes, restored by faith or power or something that felt increasingly like neither. And with each resurrection, pieces vanished. Memories eroded like coastlines under relentless waves. I forgot the names of childhood friends, forgot the taste of my favorite foods, forgot the sound of my mother's voice when she sang the old hymns of Terra. I was becoming less myself and more an icon, a symbol emptied of substance to serve as a vessel for belief. The Imperium celebrated me. Songs were written of my victories. Shrines were erected on worlds I had saved. Children were named Celestine in dozens of dialects across hundreds of systems. I was, by every objective measure, exactly what the ecclesiarchy needed me to be. But alone in my quarters aboard the strike cruiser Blessed Martyrdom, I stared at my hands and struggled to remember what they had looked like before resurrection. Had my fingers been longer, my palms narrower? I could not recall. And the uncertainty terrified me more than any enemy I had faced. The Gemini came to me after my 17th death. I had been torn apart by a Chaos dreadnought on Talarn, my body reduced to component pieces scattered across 50 meters of desert sand. The resurrection took longer that time, as if the power that sustained me struggled to determine which pieces were essential and which could be discarded. When I woke, two figures stood over me. Women in power armor, similar to my own, their faces hidden behind ornate helms, their weapons already drawn in my defense. They moved with my movements, breathed with my breath, as if we shared a single soul spread across three bodies. Eleanor and Genevieve, I named them later. Though I do not know if those were their true names or simply designations I assigned to make them feel more real. They never removed their helms in my presence, never spoke unless I spoke first, never showed any sign of independent will or desire beyond serving as my guardians and extensions of my power. I tried to know them, asked about their pasts, their lives before this binding. They answered in vague terms that revealed nothing, spoke of service and duty without describing any experience that might have predated our connection. Eventually, I understood the truth, though I did not want to accept it. They were not people who had been bound to me. They were pieces of whatever I had become, given form and armor to serve as my bodyguards and weapons. To speak to them was to speak to myself. To know them was impossible because they possessed nothing to know beyond their function. I had been granted companions who ensured I would never truly have companionship again. The crusade ground forward. Years passed, though they felt like months to my fractured perception of time. I led armies to victory after victory, my presence on the battlefield worth divisions of troops. Wherever I appeared, morale soared and the enemy faltered. I was a weapon of incalculable strategic value, deployed where faith needed reinforcement and darkness needed to be driven back. On Cronus, I died to massed bolter fire from Chaos Space Marines, who had learned that overwhelming firepower could, briefly, stop even a living saint. I returned and slaughtered them all, my blade moving faster than thought, my body responding to threats before conscious awareness registered them. We won, but I could not remember afterwards what Cronus had looked like or why we had been fighting there. On Medusa V, I died to a greater daemon of Khorne, the bloodthirster's axe cleaving through my defenses to split me in half from shoulder to hip. I returned, wreathed in such radiance that lesser daemons burst into flame at my approach. We won, but I forgot the names of the three sisters who had died buying me time to resurrect. The gaps in my memory grew from cracks to chasms. I could not recall my original name anymore, the one given to me by my parents before I joined the sisterhood. Could not remember which hive city I had been born in or what my father's profession had been. These details seemed unimportant, measured against crusades and campaigns, but their absence left me feeling unmoored, adrift in an existence defined entirely by war. Between battles, in the rare moments of peace aboard ship or in captured fortresses, I tried to hold on to what remained, kept a journal, recording what I could remember of who I had been before sanctity claimed me. But when I read entries from months or years prior, they felt like accounts of a stranger's life, memories I possessed, but could not truly claim as my own. The visions began during my 30-second death. A Necron Lord had disintegrated me with a Gauss weapon, my body reduced to constituent atoms and scattered to the void. The resurrection took hours that time, my consciousness drifting in darkness, while whatever power sustained me struggled to reconstitute my physical form. In that darkness, I saw things not of the Imperium. Gardens where rot and life intertwined in obscene growth. Palaces where pleasure and pain merged into singular sensation. Labyrinths of crystal where every path split into infinite possibilities. Fortresses of brass where war itself was worshipped as the only truth worth knowing. The ruinous powers, the chaos gods whose very names were anathema. They called to me in that darkness. Their voices sweet and terrible, promising understanding and power and purpose beyond the narrow confines of imperial doctrine. I rejected them, clung to my faith in the Emperor, but their whispers lingered even after resurrection. The demon spoke to me on Calth, We were purging the last remnants of a word-bearer warband from the underground cities where Guilliman's sons had once trained and studied. I cornered a daemon, lesser in power but possessed of unsettling intelligence, in a chamber decorated with pre-heresy imperial iconography, now defaced with chaos runes. It looked at me with eyes that held terrible recognition. "Sister in power," it hissed, its voice like silk dragged over broken glass. "Do you not see what you are? Do you not understand what sustains you?" I raised my blade to strike it down, but it continued speaking, heedless of its impending destruction. "You draw from the same well as I, the great ocean, the warp, the sea of souls. Your emperor is silent, dead, or dying upon his throne of lies. The powers that answer prayers are the same whether you call them gods or label them anathema." The blade took its head, banished it back to the Imperium from whence it came. But its words remained, echoing in my thoughts during meditation and prayer. I tried to dismiss them as the lies demons always spoke, the corruptions they attempted on the faithful. Yet doubt, once planted, proved remarkably difficult to uproot. I began to observe myself more carefully, watched how my powers manifested, analyzed the sensations that accompanied my resurrections. The light that surrounded me felt warm and comforting to the faithful. But to my own perception, it had textures and flavors that reminded me uncomfortably of the visions I had experienced in death. Not the pure golden radiance of imperial hagiography, but something more complex, more ambiguous, more hungry. On Armageddon, during the Third War, I faced an orc war boss of tremendous size and power. Our duel lasted 3 hours by the chronometer, our blows carving trenches in the earth and shattering structures around us. He killed me twice during that battle, once by crushing my skull, and once by tearing my spine from my body. Each time I returned, but with each resurrection I felt something watching, something vast and many-faced and screaming with the voices of uncounted billions. I won that fight, as I won all fights. The orc died, his warband shattered, the city saved. But victory tasted of ash and uncertainty. I looked at my hands, glowing with the light that was supposed to be the Emperor's blessing, and wondered whose power truly sustained me. The dreams grew worse. Every time I allowed myself to sleep, which was rarely now, I walked through landscapes that belonged in the warp rather than any material realm. Sometimes I saw the Emperor on his golden throne, his form withered to skeletal remnants, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily. But his face, when he looked at me, showed not pride or gratitude, but horror and disgust, as if I represented something he had never intended and could not prevent. Other times I saw things that called themselves gods, vast entities that existed in realms where sanity held no meaning. They beckoned to me, showed me visions of what I could become if I accepted their patronage fully. Power beyond imagining, purpose beyond question, existence freed from the constraints of mortality and doubt. All I had to do was acknowledge what I truly was. I rejected them always, clung to my faith with desperate intensity. But rejection grew harder with each death, each resurrection, each century that passed while I remained fundamentally unchanged. How long could a soul cling to humanity when the body housing it was remade from warp energy 100 times over? The Gemini sensed my struggles, though they never spoke of them directly. They drew closer during those periods, their silent presence a comfort even as I recognized them for what they were, fragments of my own power given form and purpose. When I was strong, they were strong. When I doubted, they flickered at the edges of perception, as if my uncertainty diminished their very existence. 300 years after my initial resurrection, I could barely remember a time before sanctity. My past life as mortal sister Celestine felt like a story I had been told, rather than experiences I had lived. The details had worn away, leaving only the broad strokes, and even those felt suspect, possibly reconstructed from official records rather than genuine memory. What remained was war Battle after battle, world after world, enemy after enemy, in endless succession. I became very good at killing, at inspiring, at radiating the faith that others needed to continue fighting. I became exactly what the Imperium required of its living saint. And in becoming that, I ceased to be much of anything else. But the doubt never fully left. In quiet moments between campaigns, I would catch myself wondering about the source of my power. Would think about the daemon's words and the dreams and the sensation of something vast watching me during every resurrection. Would question whether I served the Emperor or whether something else wore his symbols while feeding on the faith directed toward his name. These thoughts I kept private, shared with no one. To voice such doubts would be heresy, would undermine the very faith that sustained the Imperium's war effort. I was a symbol, and symbols did not question their own nature. So I fought and died and returned again and again, across centuries that blurred into a continuous present tense of warfare without end, until the day I met her. Inquisitor Covenant arrived without announcement or ceremony. Her presence aboard the blessed martyrdom detected only when she chose to make it known. I was in the Chapel of Martyrs, kneeling before the altar in what passed for private prayer, when she spoke from the shadows behind me. "You burn very brightly, Saint Celestine." Her voice carried the flat affect of someone accustomed to speaking uncomfortable truths. "The question is whether you burn with holy fire or something else entirely." I rose, hand moving toward the ardent blade out of instinct before I recognized her rosette, the symbol of authority that transcended even a living saint's supposed sanctity. She was older than I had expected, her face bearing the scars of a life spent hunting humanity's enemies both without and within. Her armor was utilitarian rather than ornate, her weapons blessed but unadorned. Everything about her suggested function over faith. "Inquisitor," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I was not informed the Ordo Hereticus would be conducting inspections. We do not announce ourselves when the subjects of our interest might be warned by such announcements." She stepped into the chapel's light, and I saw she was not alone. A figure in Psyker's robes stood behind her, a woman whose eyes had been replaced by augmetic lenses that glowed with barely contained psychic energy. 2 other retinue members flanked her, their weapons trained not on threats external to the ship, but on me. Am I under investigation? The question emerged, more sharply than I intended. "Everyone is under investigation," Covenant replied. "That is the nature of vigilance in a galaxy where corruption wears 1,000 faces. But yes, you particularly interest me. Living saints are rare and valuable assets to the Imperium. They are also dangerous anomalies that demand scrutiny." She gestured to the Psyker. "This is Interrogator Viel, sanctioned and trained to perceive the currents of the immaterium that lesser minds cannot detect. With your permission, I would have her examine you. Not your body, Saint Celestine, but your soul." I wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed that allowing such examination would reveal truths I was not prepared to face. But refusing an Inquisitor's request was tantamount to confession of guilt. And I had committed no crime beyond existing as I was made to exist. "Proceed," I said. Viel approached slowly, her augmetic eyes focusing and refocusing as if struggling to perceive me properly. When she stood within arm's reach, she extended one trembling hand toward my chest, not touching but hovering just above the ardent shroud. Her lips moved in silent prayer or possibly psychic cant, words of protection against the warp's influence. Her scream, when it came, was brief, but filled with such terror that even my enhanced physiology registered the shock of it. She staggered backward, her hand clutching at her chest as if she had been struck physically. Blood ran from her nose and the corners of her eyes, and her breathing came in ragged gasps. Covenant caught her before she fell, supporting her weight while fixing me with a stare that held no warmth or reverence. "What did you see?" she asked her subordinate. "Too much," Viel whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "She burns. Inquisitor. Emperor preserve us. She burns so brightly that looking at her soul is like staring into a star. But the light is wrong. It has colors that should not exist, harmonics that do not belong in sanctified power. Explain, Covenant demanded. Vale's augmetic eyes focused on me again, though she flinched at whatever she perceived. When a psyker looks upon a normal human, we see a small flame, a soul burning with life but contained and finite. When we look upon the faithful, that flame burns brighter, strengthened by belief and devotion. She paused, struggling for words. When I look at you, Saint Celestine, I see a conflagration that should not be possible within a single mortal form. Your soul shines with the intensity of 10,000 faithful, all compressed into one being. That sounds like the Emperor's blessing, I said. But my voice lacked conviction. It should, Vael agreed. But there are inconsistencies. The warp responds to you in ways that sanctioned psychers recognize as dangerous. You register not as a holy beacon, but as a warp entity barely contained within mortal flesh. If I did not know better, if I could not see the faith that sustains you, I would classify you as... Her voice trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. As what? I pressed, needing to hear the accusation spoken aloud. As something that should be destroyed before it manifests fully. The silence that followed stretched like a wound. Covenant studied me with the clinical detachment of someone weighing evidence and calculating outcomes. The Gemini materialized at my shoulders, their blades drawn in response to the implicit threat. But I raised a hand to stay them. Violence would solve nothing here, and might confirm suspicions that should remain unproven. I am loyal to the Emperor, I said, and it was true. Whatever else I might be, whatever power sustained me, my devotion to humanity's survival had never wavered. I have fought for 3 centuries without pause or complaint. Every victory I have won was won in his name. Loyalty is not in question, Covenant replied. Nature is. Tell me, Saint Celestine, how many times have you died and returned? I considered lying or claiming I had not kept count. But inquisitors did not ask questions to which they did not already know the answers. 68 times, I admitted. 68 confirmed deaths where witnesses could testify to my destruction and subsequent resurrection. And how do you explain this ability? I cannot. It was the most honest answer I could give. I pray to the Emperor, and he returns me to continue his work. This is what I have always believed, what the ecclesiarchy teaches about living saints. Covenant nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something she had suspected. But not what you believe now, she observed. I can see the doubt in your eyes, Saint Celestine. You question the source of your power just as we question it. That doubt may be the only thing that has saved you from corruption thus far. She gestured to Vale, who produced a data slate from her robes despite her obvious reluctance to remain in my presence. The slate's screen displayed text in High Gothic, passages from sources I did not recognize. These are records from the Ordo Hereticus archives, Covenant explained. Classified documents regarding previous living saints. Not all remained saints, as you might imagine. Some fell, either to obvious corruption or to more subtle degradation of purpose and identity. Would you like to know what patterns we identified in those who fell? I did not want to know, but I nodded anyway. Covenant read from the slate, her voice clinical and detached. Multiple resurrections leading to memory degradation. Check. Increasing disconnection from mortal concerns and relationships. Check. Growing power accompanied by decreasing ability to control or explain said power. Check. Visions during death that include imagery associated with the ruinous powers. Check. Confusion about the source of abilities that manifests as existential doubt. Check. 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 She lowered the slate. You match the profile, Saint Celestine. Not perfectly, for you have resisted longer and more successfully than most. But the pattern is there, and patterns do not lie. Whatever you are, whatever sustains you, it is not purely the Emperor's blessing. Something else mingles with the faith directed toward you, something from the warp that feeds on belief and grows stronger with each resurrection. The words struck like physical blows. To hear my worst fears given voice by someone whose authority derived from hunting exactly such corruption felt like judgment pronounced before trial concluded. "What would you have me do?" I asked. "If I am corruption incarnate, why have you not already moved to eliminate me?" "Because you are also useful," Covenant said bluntly. "The Imperium's need for symbols and inspiration outweighs many other considerations, including theological purity. You win battles, Saint Celestine. You save worlds and inspire billions to fight when they would otherwise surrender. That value cannot be discarded lightly, even if your nature is questionable." She stepped closer, near enough that I could have struck her down before her retinue could react. But her gaze held no fear, only the cold calculation of someone who had made peace with the possibility of martyrdom long ago. "I am not here to destroy you," she continued. "I am here to offer perspective and perhaps guidance. You are not the first to walk this path, and the archives contain wisdom from those who preceded you. Some fell completely and were destroyed. Others found ways to manage their condition, to serve faithfully despite the corruption gnawing at their souls. A few even discovered methods to mitigate the worst aspects of their transformation." "Methods," I repeated. "You speak as if this is a disease to be treated, rather than damnation to be purged." "Is there a difference?" Covenant asked. "The warp does not care about our theological categories. It responds to belief and emotion and will. If you believe yourself damned, perhaps you fulfill that prophecy. If you believe you can resist and retain your humanity despite the corruption, perhaps that belief itself becomes armor against the fall." I wanted to dismiss her words as sophistry, but they resonated with uncomfortable truth. My doubt had been growing precisely because I recognized the patterns she described, saw myself reflected in the histories of fallen saints who began exactly as I had begun. "What do you recommend?" I asked, finally. Covenant returned the data slate to Vael, who retreated gratefully toward the chapel's exit. "Research," the Inquisitor said. "Study. Self-examination. The ecclesiarchy will tell you to pray and have faith, but faith without understanding is merely hope, and hope alone has never stopped corruption. You must know yourself, Saint Celestine. Must understand the mechanisms of your power and the price of your resurrection. Only through knowledge can you make informed choices about how to proceed. And if I discover that I am indeed corrupted, that my power derives from the ruinous powers rather than the Emperor, then you make a choice," Covenant said simply. "Serve the Imperium despite your corruption, using tainted power for righteous ends. Remove yourself from service before you become a threat, or embrace what you are fully and accept the consequences. But make the choice consciously, with full awareness of what you do and why." She moved toward the chapel door, her retinue falling into formation around her. "One final piece of advice," she called back. "Do not assume the Emperor and the Chaos Gods are the only powers in the warp. Reality is more complex than Imperial doctrine allows. Your power may derive from sources that are neither purely holy nor purely corrupt, but something older and stranger that predates both." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the Gemini and my spiraling thoughts. I returned to my knees before the altar, but prayer brought no comfort. The Emperor's presence, which I had always felt during moments of devotion, seemed distant now. Perhaps it had always been distant, and only my faith had made it feel close. Perhaps I had been praying to my own belief, made manifest, feeding power into a cycle that sustained itself without divine intervention. The next days I spent in research, accessing what archives the ship possessed regarding living saints and their histories. Most records were hagiographic, stories of miracles and faith without substantive detail about mechanisms or prices. But scattered among the devotional texts were fragments of truth. Accounts that had survived because they were too obscure to merit censorship. Saint Morrigan, who had served for 400 years before her fall during the age of apostasy. Records described her as increasingly erratic before she turned on those she had protected, slaughtering an entire congregation who had gathered to worship her. The official account blamed chaos corruption, but reading between the sanitized lines suggested something more complex. She had realized what she was becoming and attempted to spare others from witnessing her complete transformation. Saint Catherine of the Ruby Sanctum, who had died and returned 37 times before requesting the Inquisition destroy her permanently. Her final words, preserved in a footnote of a tertiary source, were chilling in their simplicity. "I have seen what waits for me with each return, and it is not the Emperor's light." Saint Dominica herself, founder of the Orders of the Adepta Sororitas, whose death and apotheosis remained shrouded in mystery. Some sources suggested she had never truly died, merely ascended to serve at the Emperor's side. Others hinted at a more troubling truth, that her soul had been so completely consumed by the power that resurrected her that nothing mortal remained to ascend. Patterns emerged from the fragmentary histories. Saints who accepted their nature without question often fell quickly, their souls subsumed by whatever power sustained them. Saints who fought against their nature typically lasted longer but suffered more, their resistance creating internal conflict that manifested as erratic behavior and diminished capability. The few who seemed to persist longest were those who acknowledged what they were while choosing deliberately how to direct their power. I examined myself with new and merciless scrutiny, noted how my resurrections had become faster over the centuries, requiring less time and effort to reconstitute my physical form, observed how my emotional range had narrowed, joy and sorrow both muted, beneath an overwhelming sense of purpose that felt imposed rather than chosen, recognized that I could no longer truly choose to be weak or vulnerable, that my power manifested reflexively whether I willed it or not. Most disturbing was the realization that I could not remember the last time I had felt fully human, not in the sense of possessing a mortal body, for that had been gone since my first resurrection, but in the sense of experiencing existence from a human perspective. I saw the world now as a saint sees it, filtered through layers of faith and power and purpose that obscured the simple reality of being alive. The Gemini watched my research without comment, their presence a constant reminder of what I had become. They were me, or pieces of me, or fragments of the power that sustained me given anthropomorphic form. To question my nature was to question theirs, and I saw in their silent observation something that might have been concern or might have been merely reflexive response to my own uncertainty. During my next deployment, to a world besieged by orc forces, I fought with divided attention. Part of me engaged in the tactical and strategic considerations of warfare, directing troops and inspiring courage as I had done countless times before. But another part observed myself clinically, analyzing how my power manifested and what it cost. When an orc knob's chopper caught me across the midsection, nearly bisecting me, I felt the moment of death with new clarity, felt my soul begin to separate from my destroyed flesh, felt the pull of something vast reaching out to claim or restore me. And in that instant, between death and resurrection, I glimpsed its true nature. Not the Emperor on his golden throne, though his presence existed somewhere distant and unresponsive. Not the Chaos Gods, though their attention turned toward me with interest and hunger. Something else entirely. Something that existed in the place where belief became power, where faith became fact, where millions of prayers created a reservoir of energy that could be tapped by those who knew how or were made to serve as conduits. I was not blessed by the Emperor. I was sustained by the faith of those who believed in the Emperor. their prayers and devotions feeding a portion of the warp that took the shape they expected it to take. The Emperor himself might not even be aware of my existence. I was a byproduct of mass belief, a tulpa given form and purpose by the expectations of billions. The resurrection completed, and I returned to the battle with this terrible knowledge burning in my mind. We won, as we always won when I fought, but victory felt hollow now, meaningless beyond its tactical implications. I had been serving a lie, not deliberately, but ignorantly, and that ignorance had sustained me for 3 centuries. That night, alone in my quarters, I attempted something I had not tried since my initial resurrection. I prayed not to the Emperor as icon or symbol, but to the man himself, the being who sat upon the golden throne and suffered endless torment to keep the Astronomicon burning. I opened my soul with desperate honesty, seeking some confirmation that he knew me, acknowledged me, approved or disapproved of what I had become. Nothing answered. The void where I expected divine response remained empty, silent, utterly indifferent to my existence. If the Emperor lived, if he maintained any awareness beyond his singular focus on sustaining the Astronomicon, he gave no sign of watching one more soldier in his endless war. But something else stirred at the edges of my consciousness. The same vast, many-faced presence I had glimpsed during resurrections, drawn by my prayer and attempt at communion. It was not hostile, exactly, but neither was it benevolent. It simply was, responding to belief with power, to faith with manifestation, to worship with apotheosis, regardless of whether such transformation served the worshipper's interests. I recoiled from that presence, severed the connection with will born of sudden terror. To touch it directly, to acknowledge it consciously, felt like the final step toward a transformation I was not prepared to accept. Better to remain ignorant, to cling to the comfortable lie of divine blessing, than to face the truth of my nature fully. But ignorance, once shattered, could not be reconstructed. I knew now what I was. Not a saint in any meaningful theological sense, but a warp entity sustained by belief and reconstituted through faith. The power that flowed through me derived not from the Emperor's blessing, but from the desperate prayers of billions who needed to believe he still protected them. I was their hope given form, their faith made manifest, their desperate need for salvation incarnated in a being who could fight and die, and return again and again because they believed such miracles were possible. And that belief was killing me, slowly but inevitably, eroding my humanity one resurrection at a time until nothing would remain but the hollow shell they expected their saint to be. The crusade of crimson faith was meant to be my greatest triumph. 3 cardinal worlds in the Gallian sector had fallen to the word-bearers, their populations corrupted or enslaved, their shrines transformed into temples of the ruinous powers. The ecclesiarchy assembled a force of unprecedented scale to reclaim them. And I was to be the crusade's heart and symbol. 7 regiments of Imperial Guard, 12 companies of Adepta Sororitas from 4 different orders, 2 chapters of Space Marines who had agreed to fight under my nominal command, billions of pilgrims who followed in the crusade's wake, desperate to reclaim holy ground and witness the living saint in battle. The fleet that carried us numbered 400 vessels, the largest concentration of Imperial military might in the sector for half a century. I stood on the bridge of the Blessed Martyrdom as we translated into the Gallian system, watching through the viewing ports as reality reasserted itself around our ships. The 3 cardinal worlds hung in the void like corrupted jewels, their surfaces scarred by war and ritual. Athenos Prime, where the Cathedral of Eternal Truth had stood for 6,000 years. Sanctified Meridian, site of the shrine of the first martyr. Gloriana Tertius, whose entire southern continent had been converted into a single vast basilica that could hold 10 million worshippers. All 3 now bore the marks of chaos. The atmospheric readings showed sulfurous clouds and unnatural storm patterns. Augury detected warp signatures that made even hardened naval officers pale. And deep within the cathedrals and shrines, dark rituals continued their work, spreading corruption like infection through the sector. Cardinal Joris addressed the assembled commanders in the Strategium, his augmetic voice booming across the Vox network. "We stand at the threshold of holy war," he proclaimed. "3 worlds cry out for liberation. Millions of souls await salvation or merciful death. And we, blessed by the presence of Saint Celestine herself, shall deliver the Emperor's judgment upon those who defile his sacred places." The other commanders cheered, their faith absolute. I remained silent, feeling the weight of their expectation pressing down like physical force. They looked at me not as a person but as a symbol, a guarantee of victory regardless of tactical realities. Their belief sustained me, but it also trapped me, demanding I become what they needed, rather than acknowledging what I was. The campaign began well enough. We assaulted Athenos Prime first, our drop pods and landing craft descending through corrupted atmosphere to establish beachheads around the fallen cathedral. Resistance was fierce but manageable. Word-bearers and their cultist thralls fighting with the desperation of those who knew defeat meant not just death but damnation. I led the assault personally, my presence inspiring impossible courage in those who fought beside me. Sisters of battle advanced through withering fire, their faith armor against fear, if not against bullets. Guardsmen fixed bayonets and charged positions that should have been death traps, sustained by the certainty that the saint walked among them. Even the Space Marines, who typically maintained professional distance from such displays, fought with unusual fervor when I stood in their sight. We broke through the outer defenses within 3 days, faster than even optimistic projections had suggested. The word-bearers retreated toward the Cathedral of Eternal Truth, their forces consolidating for a final stand on ground they had saturated with warp energies. Our casualties were remarkably light, barely 5,000 dead in an assault that should have cost 50 times that number. Cardinal Joris proclaimed it a miracle, proof of the Emperor's favor. The pilgrims who had followed the crusade wept and prayed and sang hymns of triumph, and I felt nothing but growing unease, a sensation that something waited for us within that corrupted cathedral, something that anticipated my arrival with patience born of eternity. We spent a week preparing for the final assault, gathering our forces and allowing the wounded time to recover. Intelligence reports suggested the word-bearers numbered fewer than 500, reduced from their initial garrison of 3,000. Against our remaining strength, the mathematics were overwhelmingly in our favor. Victory was certain, but certainty is dangerous in a galaxy where belief shapes reality and faith can turn weapons. I should have recognized the trap, should have questioned why the enemy retreated so readily and consolidated so predictably, should have wondered what ritual they prepared while we gathered our strength outside their final stronghold. The assault began at dawn on the 8th day. Our artillery bombarded the cathedral for 3 hours, attempting to weaken its corrupted structure before troops advanced. The building absorbed our fire with impossible resilience, the warp energies that had soaked into its stone making it resistant to conventional destruction. I led 3,000 Sisters of Battle in the vanguard, the Gemini at my shoulders, my blade blazing with light that pushed back the unnatural darkness surrounding the cathedral. Behind us came 10,000 guardsmen, their faith bolstered by my proximity. The Space Marines moved to flank, their tactical doctrine calling for them to strike from unexpected angles while the enemy focused on our frontal assault. We breached the cathedral's main entrance with melta charges, the blessed weapons burning through even warp-reinforced adamantium. The doors fell inward, revealing darkness so complete that even our enhanced vision struggled to penetrate it. But we advanced anyway, because faith demanded we advance, because the pilgrims watched and needed to see their saint march fearlessly into the enemy's stronghold. The interior of the cathedral had been transformed into a vision from the warp itself. The walls breathed, their stone surface pulsing with organic rhythm. The floor was slick with substances that might have been blood or ichor or something that partook of both. The air tasted of copper and sulfur and sweet rot, so thick with corruption that even my enhanced physiology registered discomfort. And suspended from the vaulted ceiling, held by chains that seemed woven from shadow and suffering, hung the bodies of 10,000 pilgrims who had made the mistake of worshipping on this world when the word-bearers arrived. They were not dead, not precisely. Their eyes moved to track our progress. Their mouths formed shapes that might have been prayers or pleas or curses. They had been kept alive through warp sorcery and dark miracles, sustained in agony to fuel whatever ritual the word-bearers had prepared. The sisters beside me faltered at the sight, their faith shaken by such comprehensive desecration. But I pushed forward, because that was what saints did, what symbols were expected to do. My light blazed brighter, pushing back the darkness, and those who followed me found courage in that radiance to continue advancing despite the horror surrounding us. We progressed deeper into the cathedral, fighting through cultists and daemons that materialized from the corrupted stone. The resistance was token, almost symbolic, as if the enemy wanted us to reach the inner sanctum where their true work awaited. I recognized the tactical error even as I committed to it, but pulling back would have shattered the morale of those who followed, would have revealed doubt that a saint should not possess. The dark apostle waited for us at the cathedral's heart, in the great nave where once 10 million faithful had gathered for the High Cardinal's sermons. He stood alone before the altar, his crimson armor decorated with scripture written in languages that predated humanity's fall. His name was Marduk the Enlightened, and his presence in the warp registered like a wound in reality. "Welcome, Saint Celestine," he said, his voice carrying easily across the vast space, despite speaking barely above a whisper. "We have prepared this moment with great care, measuring and calculating, ensuring all variables aligned perfectly. You come as we knew you would, driven by duty and the expectations of those who worship you." I raised the ardent blade, preparing to strike him down and end this theater. But he merely smiled, an expression of genuine pleasure rather than cruelty. "Strike me if you wish," he continued. "Kill me and disrupt our ritual. But first, look upon what we have created. Look upon the truth we offer as gift rather than curse." He gestured toward the altar, and the air above it shimmered, reality tearing like parchment to reveal the warp beneath. Through that tear, I saw something that shattered the fragile certainty I had been clinging to for 3 centuries. I saw the Emperor, not as the ecclesiarchy depicted him, golden and glorious, and eternally vigilant. I saw him as he truly was, a corpse preserved through alchemy and sacrifice, his consciousness so fractured across 10,000 years of agony that nothing coherent remained. His soul, stretched thin as a veil across the Astronomican's beacon, screamed silently with pain that transcended mortal understanding. And I saw myself, reflected in that vision, saw what I would become with each resurrection, each death, each prayer that bound me tighter to the role faith demanded I fulfill. Not a servant of that tormented god corpse, but something worse. A daemon wearing a saint's face, sustained by the same mechanisms that powered the entities I had spent centuries fighting. The only difference was the name believers used when they worshipped. The vision showed me my future. Centuries more of service, my humanity eroding with each death until nothing remained but the hollow icon. Eventually, the final transformation, when enough belief accumulated to complete my apotheosis, I would become a warp entity fully manifested, a daemon prince in all but name, still wearing holy symbols and still fighting for the Imperium, but no longer in any meaningful sense the person I had been. And worst of all, the vision showed me what that transformation would cost. Not just my soul, but the souls of all who had bound themselves to me through faith. The sisters who served under my command. The pilgrims who prayed to me, the soldiers who fought harder because they believed in my sanctity. All of them would be dragged into the warp with me when I finally fell, their faith chains that pulled them into damnation alongside their saint. Marduk watched my face as the truth struck home. "You understand now," he said softly. "You see what you are and what you will become. The Emperor does not save you, Saint Celestine. He cannot save himself. Your resurrections draw power from the same warp we serve, the same ocean of souls and suffering that sustains all miraculous power. You are our sister in damnation, wearing righteousness as disguise." "No," I whispered, but the denial rang hollow even to my own ears. The Dark Apostle continued, relentless in his compassion or cruelty. "We do not offer this vision to corrupt you. You are already corrupted by the very nature of your existence. We offer it as illumination, as truth you would never accept from those who worship you. The choice before you is not whether to serve chaos or the Emperor. The choice is whether to acknowledge what you are or continue the lie until it consumes you completely." I wanted to strike him down, to destroy him and seal the tear in reality that showed me truths too terrible to accept. But my hand would not move. The ardent blade remained raised but frozen, as if my will had been paralyzed by the weight of revelation. And in that moment of hesitation, the ritual completed. The 10,000 pilgrims hanging from the ceiling ignited simultaneously, their souls ripped from their bodies and cast into the warp. The energy released by their deaths cascaded through the cathedral, through me, through every person whose faith connected them to my being. I felt my connection to them waver, felt the belief that sustained me flicker and dim as they witnessed their saint frozen before the enemy, unable or unwilling to act. Doubt rippled through the sisters who had followed me, through the guardsmen who had trusted my inspiration, through the space marines who had accepted my authority despite their typical independence. My light dimmed. For the first time in 3 centuries, the radiance that surrounded me guttered like a candle in storm wind. The Gemini beside me flickered, their forms becoming translucent as the power sustaining them weakened. I felt mortality creeping back into my flesh, felt vulnerability and weakness, and all the limitations I had transcended through faith and resurrection. The word-bearers attacked in that moment of weakness, emerging from concealment throughout the cathedral. They had waited for this, for the instant when the saint's blessing failed and left her followers exposed. Bolt of fire filled the air, cutting down sisters and guardsmen who had advanced too far on faith alone without proper tactical support. The slaughter was immediate and catastrophic. Hundreds died in the first seconds, their bodies torn apart by mass reactive rounds. The survivors tried to retreat, but the word-bearers had positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. What should have been a triumphant assault became a massacre, my forces trapped in a killing ground because they had relied on my sanctity rather than proper military doctrine. I forced myself to move, to fight despite the doubt eating at my soul. Raised the ardent blade and charged Marduk, determined to kill him even if I could no longer inspire those around me. Our blades met, his crackling with warp energy and mine dim with fading faith. And I realized with horror that we were evenly matched now. Without the full power of my sanctity, I was merely an enhanced warrior rather than an overwhelming force of nature. The battle raged around us, but I could spare no attention for it. All my focus narrowed to the Dark Apostle before me, to defeating him and proving that I remained the saint they needed me to be. Our duel carried us across the cathedral floor, through pools of blood, and over corpses of those who had believed in me. He spoke while we fought, his voice calm despite the violence. "You can still choose, Saint Celestine. Acknowledge what you are and embrace it consciously. Serve the Imperium with full knowledge of the price, or cling to the lie and let it devour you slowly. But you cannot return to ignorance. That mercy is denied you now." I drove my blade through his throat, silencing him mid-word. He collapsed, his body dissolving into warp stuff that dissipated with his death. But his final words echoed in my mind. mixing with the screams of my dying soldiers and the terrible silence where the Emperor's presence should have been. Around me, the battle continued to deteriorate. My sisters fought with desperation born of seeing their saint vulnerable. But desperation without faith was merely panic given purpose. The word-bearers pressed their advantage, their discipline and experience overwhelming our shaken forces. I reached deep within myself, past the doubt and revelation, and found the rage that had sustained me through 300 years of warfare. Found the core of will that had chosen to serve despite uncertainty, that had fought and died and returned because someone needed to stand against the darkness. It was not faith, not anymore, but it was real, more real than the belief others had in me. The light returned, blazing from my armor with renewed intensity. Not because I believed in the Emperor's blessing, but because I chose to be the symbol they needed regardless of the cost to my soul. The power flowed through me, drawn from that vast reservoir of faith whether I acknowledged its source or not. I could no more refuse it than I could refuse to breathe. The Gemini solidified beside me, their forms gaining substance as my power reasserted itself. Together we carved through the word-bearers, cutting them down with efficiency born of centuries of practice. The sisters and guardsmen, seeing their saint radiant once more, rallied and pressed forward with renewed fervor. We won the battle, drove the word-bearers from the cathedral, and purged the corruption from its stones with blessed fire. The outer forces, hearing of victory within, pressed their assaults and broke the remaining enemy resistance across Athenos Prime. By nightfall, the planet was declared liberated, its shrines ready for reconsecration. But the cost was unbearable. Of the 3,000 sisters who had followed me into the cathedral, fewer than 700 survived. The guardsmen lost 6,000 of their 10,000. The Space Marines, attacking from the flanks, suffered minimal casualties but reported battlefield conditions inconsistent with a saint's presence. They had felt my light dim and witnessed the near collapse of our assault. Cardinal Joris attempted to spin it as glorious martyrdom, as sacrifice offered willingly for the Emperor's glory. But the survivors knew better, knew they had nearly been slaughtered because their saint had hesitated, had wavered, had allowed doubt to dim the light that kept them safe. Sister Superior Agatha confronted me in my quarters that night, her armor still scorched from battle, her face haggard with grief and rage. 300 of my sisters died today, she said without preamble. Died because you failed us at the critical moment. What happened in that cathedral, Saint Celestine? What did the enemy show you that made you falter? I could not answer. Could not explain the vision, or the revelation, or the terrible choice Marduk had laid before me. Could not admit that I no longer knew whether I served the Emperor or something that wore his face while feeding on humanity's desperate faith. You are supposed to be our symbol of hope, Agatha continued, her voice breaking. Our proof that the Emperor watches over us. But you hesitated, and 300 sisters paid the price for your doubt. If you cannot maintain your faith, if you cannot be what we need you to be, then you have no right to call yourself saint. She was right, and her words cut deeper than any blade. I had failed in the most fundamental duty of a saint, to be the unwavering symbol that others could cling to when their own faith wavered. My doubt had killed them as surely as if I had drawn my blade across their throats. Sister Superior Agatha died 3 hours later. The wounds she had sustained in the cathedral, ignored in the heat of battle, overwhelmed her enhanced physiology. She cursed my name with her final breath, declaring me false and hollow and unworthy of the devotion others wasted on my sanctity. I could not disagree, could not defend myself against accusations that merely voiced what I already knew to be true. The Gemini stood beside me as I knelt by Agatha's body, their presence silent and accusatory. They had flickered when I wavered, had nearly ceased to exist because my doubt threatened the power that sustained them. They were fragments of me, and my crisis had become theirs. If I fell, they fell. If I failed, they failed. The burden of my nature extended beyond my own soul to encompass even these extensions of my being. Cardinal Joris ordered the crusade to continue despite the casualties on Athenos Prime. We still had 2 more worlds to liberate, 2 more cathedrals to reclaim. The Imperium's momentum could not be allowed to falter, and the pilgrims needed to see that their saint remained committed to holy war despite setbacks. But I knew the truth. I had cracked under the weight of revelation, had seen what I was and what I would become, and that knowledge had broken something fundamental within me. The faith that had sustained me for 3 centuries was gone, replaced by grim determination to fulfill my function regardless of whether that function damned me. I was no longer a saint in any meaningful sense. I was a weapon, wielded by the Imperium and sustained by belief whether I chose it or not. And weapons, once they crack, become dangerous not just to enemies but to everyone around them. I disappeared 3 days after Athenos Prime was declared liberated. Left no message, no explanation. Simply failed to appear when Cardinal Joris summoned me for the assault planning on Sanctified Meridian. The Gemini came with me because they had no choice, bound to my existence as thoroughly as shadow to substance. The ship I commandeered was a small courier vessel, fast and unremarkable, the kind that moved through the Imperium's vast bureaucracy without attracting attention. Its captain protested my requisition until I fixed him with the full weight of my gaze, letting him see the thing that wore a saint's face. He surrendered the command codes without further argument and asked no questions about my destination. I had no destination. Only the need to be away from the crusade, from the pilgrims and their expectations, from the soldiers who died because they believed in something that did not exist. The navigator set course for the galactic fringe, toward systems that appeared on few charts and mattered to fewer people. Places where the Imperium's light barely reached and faith held less power. The first world I visited had no name in Imperial records, only a designation, Epsilon Trace 9, a dead world, its atmosphere long since boiled away by its dying star, its surface scarred by conflicts so ancient that even the Mechanicus could not date them. I walked its airless wastes in my armor, the Gemini trailing behind, and felt nothing. No divine presence, no warp signature, just silence and the empty peace of genuine death. I stood on that dead world for 3 days, testing whether I could simply choose to stop, whether I could will myself to remain there until my armor's systems failed and the void claimed me. But my biology would not cooperate. The enhancements that made me more than human also made me maddeningly difficult to kill through mere neglect. And when I finally tried to remove my helmet, to expose myself to vacuum and end it quickly, my hands would not obey. Some instinct deeper than conscious will prevented me from choosing death deliberately. The second world held ruins, structures built by a civilization that had risen and fallen before humanity learned to make fire. The architecture defied understanding, angles that should not support weight, materials that had weathered millennia without visible decay. I explored the ruins, seeking some answer to questions I could barely articulate, hoping the universe might contain wisdom older than the Imperium's certainties. What I found instead was proof of repetition. Murals on walls that had stood since before Old Night, depicting figures surrounded by light, worshipped by crowds of believers. Saints, or their equivalent, in whatever culture had built these structures. And in the final murals, those same figures transformed, their light becoming corruption, their blessings becoming curses. The pattern transcended species and epochs. Faith created power. Power transformed the faithful, and transformation inevitably led to fall. The third world held life, after a fashion. A human colony that had lost contact with the Imperium 20 generations prior and evolved its own culture in isolation. They worshipped the Emperor still, but through lenses so distorted by time and ignorance that their faith barely resembled Imperial doctrine. I observed them from orbit, watching their rituals and prayers, seeing how belief shaped their reality despite the absence of any true connection to Terra or the Golden Throne. They had their own saint, a woman who had died defending their primary settlement from Xenos raiders and returned wreathed in light, exactly as I had returned on Corellius Prime. She led them now, performed miracles, small but genuine, and inspired devotion that bordered on fanaticism. I watched her through augmented lenses and saw myself reflected, saw the same pattern playing out on this isolated world because faith operated by rules that transcended imperial authority. I considered killing her, putting a bolt round through her skull before the pattern could complete, before she could experience the centuries of erosion that awaited anyone who accepted sanctity's burden. But who was I to deny her the choice I had made? Who was I to decide that my knowledge of the cost justified preventing others from walking the same path? In the end, I left her to her fate and moved on. The fourth world was where I met Sister Nadia. She lived alone in a crashed ship on a moon so remote that even pirates ignored it, her presence barely registering on any scanner. I almost missed her myself, but something drew me to investigate the ancient wreck, some instinct that recognized a kindred spirit. She was ancient, far older than any human should be capable of surviving. Her body was more machine than flesh, augmetics and life support systems sustaining her beyond any reasonable limit. But her eyes, when she fixed them on me, held terrible awareness and recognition. "You are young yet," she said by way of greeting. "Young enough to still fight what you are becoming. But you will lose that fight, sister. We all lose it eventually." "You were a saint," I said, knowing it was true even as I spoke. Not a question, but acknowledgement. 3,000 years ago, she confirmed. Give or take a century. Time becomes difficult to track when you have lived too long. I was Saint Nadia of the Order of the Sacred Rose, blessed by the Emperor himself, according to the priests who witnessed my resurrection. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Blessed. What a word. What a comfortable lie. She gestured for me to sit, though the crashed ship's interior offered little in the way of furniture. The Gemini remained standing, their weapons ready, their wariness evident even through their helms. Nadia noticed them and smiled without humor. "Your shadows wear your face," she observed. "That is new. In my time, we manifested our power differently, but the principle was the same. Belief made manifest, faith given form and purpose. Tell me, do they speak? Do they have thoughts of their own? Or are they merely extensions of your will?" "I do not know," I admitted. "They have never said anything that was not an echo of my own thoughts." "Then they are not people," Nadia said simply. "Merely pieces of you that have achieved sufficient complexity to approximate independence. When you finally fall, they will cease to exist. Their souls, if they possess such things, returning to the whole from which they were fractured." The Gemini did not react to this pronouncement, which was its own kind of confirmation. I studied Nadia more carefully, noting how her augmetics had been installed with brutal efficiency rather than the reverence typically shown to saints. Scars covered what little organic flesh remained visible, suggesting a history of violence and suffering that transcended even the usual Adepta Sororitas experience. "You know what we are," I said. "You understand the mechanism of our resurrection and the price of our power. Why have you not shared this knowledge? Why allow the ecclesiarchy to continue creating saints when you know what awaits them?" "Because the Imperium needs its lies," Nadia replied. "Needs its symbols and miracles and proof that the Emperor watches over humanity. Without these comforts, faith would crumble, and faith is the only thing preventing complete collapse. Better that a few of us suffer damnation than billions lose hope entirely." She leaned forward, her augmetic eyes focusing with mechanical precision. "But you did not come here for philosophy. You came seeking answers about what you are and what options remain available to you. So let me tell you what 3,000 years of existence have taught me about being a so-called living saint. The power that sustains us comes from the warp," she began. not directly from the Emperor, though his existence shapes the warp's currents in ways that make our resurrection possible. We are manifestations of collective belief, tulpas given substance by millions of prayers and expectations. The faithful believe the Emperor will save them, and that belief creates a reservoir of energy in the warp. We tap that reservoir, consciously or not, and it reconstitutes us when we die. I already knew this, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone who had lived with the knowledge for millennia gave it new weight. The price of this power is our humanity, Nadia continued. Each resurrection erodes our sense of self, our memories, our connection to mortal existence. We become less human and more archetypal, shaped by expectation rather than experience. Eventually, if we persist long enough, nothing of our original personality remains. We become hollow vessels filled entirely by the role faith demands we play. How long? I asked. How long before the transformation completes? It varies, she said. Depends on how often you die, how strong the faith sustaining you, how much you fight against what you are becoming. For me, it took about 800 years before I ceased to recognize myself. Another 1200 before I realized I had become something that should not exist. I have spent the last millennium trying to die and failing. She gestured at her augmetics. I have done everything short of throwing myself into a star. Had tech priests remove my organic components piece by piece. Exposed myself to weapons that should annihilate anything living. Nothing works. The faith persists. The belief continues. And I resurrect regardless of what I do to this body. I am trapped in existence by the prayers of people who died millennia ago, sustained by faith that has outlived everyone who originally offered it. Her words painted a future more horrifying than anything I had imagined. Not just centuries of service, but eternal existence as a tool unable to choose its own end. A weapon that could not be sheathed, a symbol that could not be retired. Consciousness imprisoned in a cycle of death and resurrection that transcended any meaningful definition of life. There must be a way, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Some method to sever the connection permanently, to die in a manner that prevents resurrection. There are 3 paths, Nadia said, holding up 3 mechanical fingers. First, you can accept what you are and embrace it fully. Stop fighting the transformation and allow yourself to become the archetype completely. This grants a kind of peace, the peace of surrendering identity in service to purpose. Many saints choose this path, consciously or not. They stop being people and become pure function. Second, she continued, lowering one finger, you can fight until you are destroyed by external force. Not just killed, but annihilated so completely that even warp energy cannot find enough of you to reconstitute. This requires facing an enemy of overwhelming power, something capable of destroying not just your body but your soul. Daemon princes sometimes possess such capability, though fighting one carries the risk of corruption worse than simple death. And the third path? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. You sever the connection between yourself and the faith that sustains you, Nadia said quietly. Make everyone who believes in you lose that faith simultaneously. If enough people reject you, curse you, deny your sanctity all at once, the reservoir of power in the warp dissipates. Without that sustaining energy, you become mortal again. And mortal beings can die permanently. How? I demanded. How do you make millions lose faith at once? You give them reason to, she said simply. You commit an act so heinous, so contrary to everything a saint represents. That belief becomes impossible. You become the monster they fear rather than the symbol they worship. You destroy what you are meant to protect, defile what you are meant to sanctify, and in doing so, you cut yourself free from the role faith has imposed on you. The idea was monstrous. To murder innocents, to desecrate holy sites, to become everything I had fought against for 3 centuries, all in the name of achieving the death that had been denied me. The cost would be measured not just in bodies, but in shattered faith, in the spiritual damage inflicted on those who had believed in something pure and found only corruption. "I did it," Nadia said, her voice distant with memory. 1,500 years ago, when I still possessed enough humanity to care about consequences, I attacked a shrine world where my worship was strongest, killed thousands of pilgrims who had come to pray to me, burned the temples erected in my honor. The ecclesiarchy declared me fallen, my name stricken from records, my existence denied, and for the first time in 800 years, I felt mortality return. "What happened?" I asked, already suspecting the answer from her continued existence. "It did not take," she said bitterly. "Some faith always survives. Some believers refuse to accept that their saint has fallen, insist it must be corruption or deception or impersonation. Their continued belief was enough to sustain me, though weakened. I remained trapped in existence, now carrying the weight of the atrocity I had committed without achieving the release I sought." She gestured at her ruined body, her isolated existence. "So, I removed myself from the galaxy as much as possible. Live where no one can find me, where prayers cannot reach, where I am forgotten by all, except those who hunt fallen saints. It is not death, but it is close enough, a kind of living entombment that approximates the peace I can never truly achieve." We sat in silence for long moments, the weight of her story pressing down like atmospheric pressure. The Gemini remained motionless at my shoulders, their presence a reminder that I was not truly alone even in this isolation. They existed because I existed, and if I fell or succeeded in dying, they would cease with me. "Is there no other way?" I asked finally. "No method that does not require becoming a monster or suffering eternal imprisonment. If there is, I have not found it in 3,000 years of searching," Nadia replied. "The warp does not release what it has claimed easily. Faith is a hook lodged deep in the soul, and pulling it free requires more force than most possess. You are young yet, Saint Celestine. Young enough that memories of your mortal life still have some substance, but those will fade, as mine have faded, until all that remains is the eternal present of service without end." She leaned back against the crashed ship's bulkhead, her augmetic systems humming softly. "My advice, for what little it is worth, is this: choose consciously what you will become. Do not allow circumstance or faith or duty to make the choice for you. If you can accept eternal service, embrace it without reservation and find what peace that acceptance offers. If you cannot, then plan your fall carefully and ensure it accomplishes what you intend. But do not do what I did. Do not exist in this liminal state between saint and fallen, belonging nowhere and serving no one." I stood. The conversation clearly concluded. "Thank you," I said, uncertain whether gratitude was appropriate for such bitter knowledge. "Do not thank me," Nadia replied. "I have given you no gift, merely confirmed what you already suspected. Now go, and do not return. I have made my choice to remain here in isolation. You must make your own choice, whatever form that takes." The Gemini and I returned to the ship, leaving Nadia to her self-imposed exile. As we translated into the warp, heading toward destinations I had not yet chosen, her words echoed in my mind. 3 paths, none of them acceptable, all of them leading to loss of one form or another. I thought of the crusade I had abandoned, of Cardinal Joris and his armies waiting for their saint to return. Thought of the pilgrims who had followed in hope of witnessing miracles. Thought of Sister Superior Agatha, dead, cursing my name because I had failed to be what they needed. And I thought of the vision Marduk had shown me, the future that awaited if I continued serving as I had for 3 centuries. Gradual erosion of self until nothing remained but the hollow symbol, the icon emptied of content. Eternal existence as a tool unable to choose its own purpose or end. The choice before me was impossible, but it was also unavoidable. Continue and lose myself slowly across centuries, fall deliberately and become the monster that could die, or isolate myself as Nadia had, existing without purpose in the hope that being forgotten might approximate peace. I spent months in that ship, wandering the galaxy's edges, visiting worlds where imperial authority barely reached and faith held less power. Everywhere I went, I saw the same patterns. Belief creating power. Power transforming the faithful. Transformation leading inevitably to corruption or loss of self. The mechanisms were universal, transcending species and culture and time. And everywhere I went, the Gemini followed. Silent witnesses to my crisis, bound to suffer whatever fate I chose, because they were not people capable of choosing differently. They were me, or fragments of me, and their existence depended on mine continuing regardless of whether that continuation served any purpose beyond perpetuating the cycle. On a world whose name I never learned, I found a library that had survived Old Night intact. Its archives contained texts from before the Age of Strife, philosophical and scientific writings that approached reality without the filter of imperial doctrine. I spent weeks reading, searching for some insight the Imperium might have lost or suppressed. What I found was confirmation of what I already knew. Consciousness creates reality in the warp. Belief has substance. Faith shapes the immaterium according to expectation. The Emperor himself was likely a similar construct. Humanity's desperate need for a savior made manifest, sustained by the prayers of quadrillions across the galaxy. Not a god in any traditional sense, but collective will given form and purpose. And if the Emperor was such a construct, then so was I. A smaller manifestation of the same principle, localized and personal rather than galaxy-spanning. The prayers offered to him could not reach him, could not penetrate the endless agony of the Golden Throne. But they pooled in the warp, awaiting something capable of channeling them into reality. Saints were that channel, consciously or not. We gave the faithful what they needed while consuming ourselves in the process. I left that library with no more answers than I had entered with, but clarity about the question I faced. Not whether to serve or fall, but whether to serve consciously or blindly. Whether to accept the role faith had imposed or to reject it at any cost. The ship's navigator found me in my quarters as we prepared to translate back into real space. She was old even for a navigator, her third eye clouded with cataracts that somehow did not impair her ability to perceive the warp. She studied me with her two normal eyes, her expression unreadable. "Where do we go now, Saint?" she asked, using the title I had not claimed in months. "I do not know," I admitted. "Away from the crusade, away from expectations. Somewhere, I can decide who and what I choose to be. There is nowhere in the Imperium remote enough for that," she said quietly. "Your name is known on 10,000 worlds. Your face is painted on cathedral ceilings and shrine walls across the galaxy. Even if you never return to service, even if you disappear entirely, the faith in you persists. You cannot escape what you have become simply by running from it." She was right, and her words crystallized the decision I had been avoiding. I could not escape through isolation, could not hide from faith that would seek me out regardless of where I fled. The only way forward was through, accepting one of the three paths Nadia had described and following it to whatever end awaited. "Set course for Sanctus Lys," I told the navigator. "The shrine world where my worship was strongest, where pilgrims gathered by the millions to pray at temples erected in my honor, where faith in Saint Celestine burned brightest and would need to be extinguished most completely." The navigator's third eye opened fully, perceiving something in the warp that alarmed her. "That is a dangerous course," she said. "What you contemplate, what I sense in your intention, it will damn you." "I am already damned," I replied. "The only question is whether that damnation serves a purpose or simply perpetuates itself forever. Inquisitor Covenant found me before I reached Sanctus Lyce. Her ship intercepted mine at a predetermined coordinate, suggesting she had been tracking my movements since I disappeared from the Crusade. The meeting took place aboard a neutral vessel, an ancient monitoring station abandoned millennia ago and now serving as her temporary base of operations. She waited in what had once been the station's command center, surrounded by data screens displaying information I could not fully parse. Maps of the warp, faith concentration measurements, predictive models that attempted to quantify beliefs' influence on reality. The work of decades or centuries, all focused on understanding phenomena the Imperium officially attributed to divine intervention. "You know what I intend," I said without preamble. "Your psychers have seen it in the warp, or your agents have intercepted my communications. You would not be here otherwise. I know you intend to fall." Covenant confirmed. "To commit an atrocity so complete that faith in you cannot survive it. The question is whether you understand the full implications of what you plan, or whether you act from desperation without considering alternatives." "What alternatives?" I demanded. "Continue serving until I cease to be anything recognizable as human, isolate myself and exist in limbo for millennia like Sister Nadia? There are no good choices, Inquisitor. Only degrees of damnation." Covenant gestured to the data screens. "I have studied living saints for 80 years, tracked their manifestations, analyzed their power signatures, documented their eventual fates. Of the 147 confirmed saints in Imperial history, only 12 successfully severed their connection to the warp and achieved permanent death. The rest either fell to corruption, were destroyed by external forces, or persist in various states of diminishment across the galaxy." 12, I repeated. "What was different about those 12? They had help," Covenant said simply. "Assistance from those who understood the mechanisms of their power and could facilitate severance without requiring mass atrocity." She paused, studying my reaction. "I can offer you the same assistance, Saint Celestine. But the price is steep, and the method will require you to do things that cannot be undone." She activated one of the screens, displaying schematics I recognized as psychic null field generators, technology typically employed against demon incursions and warp phenomena. "Combined with these," she continued, indicating another schematic showing a ritual circle inscribed with wards that hurt to look at directly, "we can create conditions that sever your connection to the faith sustaining you. It requires 3 components. First," she said, holding up one finger, "we need concentrated anti-faith. Not mere absence of belief, but active rejection by those whose prayers currently sustain you. This must be profound and sincere, driven by genuine horror rather than mere disappointment. Second, temporal synchronization. The rejection must occur simultaneously across multiple worlds, creating a cascade effect that drains the reservoir of warp energy faster than it can replenish. This requires careful planning and coordination. Third, and most critical, you must genuinely desire death, not as escape from duty or fear of what you will become, but as acceptance of mortality's return. The soul cannot be severed from the warp while still clinging to existence. You must let go completely, trusting that permanent death is preferable to continued half-life." She lowered her hand. "I can provide the null field generators and the ritual framework. I can coordinate the timing to ensure maximum effect. But the anti-faith, the genuine rejection by millions of believers, can only be created through your actions. And those actions must be unforgivable." I already knew this, but hearing it laid out with clinical precision made the reality inescapable. "What magnitude of atrocity would be required?" I asked. "How many must die to generate sufficient rejection?" Covenant consulted her data screens, calculations flowing across them too quickly to follow. "Based on current faith, concentration measurements, and distribution patterns, I estimate you would need to kill between 50,000 and 100,000 believers in a context that makes your corruption undeniable. The deaths must be witnessed, recorded, and disseminated across the Imperium to ensure the rejection spreads sufficiently. She pulled up an image of Sanctus Lys, the shrine world where my worship concentrated most intensely. This world holds approximately 4 million permanent residents and hosts between 1 and 3 million pilgrims at any given time. Nearly 20% of its surface is dedicated to structures honoring your sanctity. If you were to attack during a high pilgrimage period, you could achieve the necessary death toll within a single day. The numbers were staggering, but they matched my own rough calculations. Sanctus Lys was the logical target, the place where faith in me burned brightest and would need to be extinguished most thoroughly. And the survivors? I asked. Those who witness, but do not die? What of their faith? That depends on how complete your desecration appears, Covenant replied. If they believe you were possessed or corrupted against your will, some faith may persist. But if they witness you deliberately choosing to slaughter the faithful, if you speak heresies and defile sacred sites with obvious intentionality, then rejection should be total among survivors. She paused, her expression showing something that might have been sympathy or might have been merely tactical consideration. There is another factor to consider: your Gemini Superior. They are sustained by the same faith that sustains you, perhaps even more directly since they manifest only in your presence. When you sever your connection to the warp, they will cease to exist. Not die, exactly, but simply stop being. If they possess any fragment of independent consciousness, this will be their death. I looked to the Gemini standing at my shoulders. They had followed me without question through months of isolation and doubt, had manifested my power without complaint, even when I barely understood what they were. And now I would extinguish them along with myself, ending whatever quasi-existence they possessed because I could not bear my own. Do they know? I asked. Do they understand what I plan? If they possess awareness sufficient to understand, then yes, Covenant said. They are connected to your consciousness intimately. They must perceive your intentions as clearly as they perceive your commands. The Gemini remained motionless, offering no sign of objection or acceptance. Perhaps they truly were mere extensions of my will, incapable of independent thought. Or perhaps they understood and accepted their fate because they had no choice, bound to my decisions as thoroughly as I was bound to the role faith had imposed. What happens after? I asked. Assuming the severance succeeds, and I achieve mortality, do I simply die of the wounds inflicted during the massacre, or is there some other mechanism? Covenant activated another schematic. This one showing the null field generators positioned around a central point. Once the faith severing begins, you enter the ritual circle. The null fields activate at maximum intensity, physically separating you from the warp. In that moment, you will be vulnerable as you have not been since your initial resurrection. Any wound will be permanent. Any death will be final. She indicated a device at the center of the circle, something that looked like an execution mechanism dressed in ritual significance. I recommend using this. A sanctified bolt round through the brain, delivered while the null fields hold the warp at bay. Quick, certain, and symbolic. A saint executing herself with the weapon of the faithful. And my body afterward? I asked. What prevents someone from retrieving it and praying for my resurrection? The null fields will remain active for 72 hours after your death, Covenant said. During that time, your corpse will be completely destroyed, reduced to component atoms and scattered. Nothing will remain that could serve as focus for resurrection. Even if sufficient faith somehow survived the massacre. It was a thorough plan, crafted with the same precision the Inquisition brought to hunting daemons and purging heretics. But thoroughness did not make it any less monstrous. I would need to murder tens of thousands, defile everything I had protected for 3 centuries, and become exactly the monster the Imperium trained its warriors to destroy. Why? I asked Covenant. Why help me with this? You are Ordo Hereticus. Your mandate is to destroy corruption, not facilitate it. Why offer assistance instead of simply executing me and ending the threat I represent? Because you are not corrupted yet, she replied. And because I have seen what happens when living saints are allowed to continue until they are. 3 times in my career, I have been forced to put down saints who transformed fully into warp entities while believing themselves still holy. The casualties were catastrophic. Entire systems lost, billions dead or worse. If I can prevent even one such transformation by helping you achieve the death you seek, then the cost in lives and faith is acceptable. She stepped closer, her expression showing the weight of decisions made across decades of service. I will not lie to you, Saint Celestine. What you plan is evil by any moral standard. The pilgrims you will kill are innocents. The faith you will shatter sustains countless soldiers and civilians across the Imperium. The damage will ripple outward in ways we cannot fully predict. But the alternative, allowing you to continue until you become something that can only be stopped through exterminatus or worse, is categorically more evil. I choose the lesser damnation. And if I refuse? I asked. If I cannot bring myself to commit such atrocity, what then? Then I monitor you closely and prepare contingencies for when you inevitably fall despite your resistance, Covenant said without hesitation. You have already cracked, Saint Celestine. I saw it in the reports from Athenos Prime, witnessed how your light faltered and recovered. You cannot maintain your current state indefinitely. The only question is whether you choose your fall consciously or allow it to happen uncontrolled. She was right, and I had known it since the cathedral where Marduk showed me the truth. The pattern was inevitable. The only choice was whether to direct my fall toward a purpose or let it consume me randomly. I accept, I said, the words tasting like poison. I will do what is necessary, but I want your word that you will ensure the true nature of what I do is never revealed. Let the Imperium believe I was corrupted by chaos. Let them use my fall as a cautionary tale about pride and false sanctity. But do not let them know I chose this deliberately, that I murdered innocents as a calculated act to achieve death. Let that damnation be mine alone. Covenant nodded slowly. Agreed. The official record will show Saint Celestine fell to corruption during her isolation. That darkness claimed her despite her previous service. Your deliberate choice will be classified at the highest levels, known only to a handful of inquisitors who understand the necessity of what you do. She produced a data slate, its screen displaying detailed plans for the assault on Sanctus Lys. Tactical approaches, optimal timing, weapon configurations modified to appear corrupted. The work of months condensed into actionable intelligence. The next major pilgrimage occurs in 43 days, she said. The Festival of the Saints' Ascension. Ironically, 3 million pilgrims are expected to attend, filling the plaza of eternal devotion and surrounding districts. Maximum concentration of faith, maximum witnesses to your fall, maximum casualties, achievable in minimum time. She handed me the data slate. I have positioned assets to assist, ships that will appear corrupted but remain under my control, providing you escape routes and ensuring no Imperial forces intervene prematurely. Null field generators are already being moved into position in the catacombs beneath the plaza. Everything is prepared. You need only commit to the action. I took the data slate, its weight somehow heavier than any weapon I had carried. 43 days to prepare mentally for becoming a mass murderer. 43 days to extinguish whatever remained of Sister Celestine and embrace the role of fallen saint completely. One more thing, Covenant said as I turned to leave. There will be Adepta Sororitas on Sanctus Lys, members of your own order, serving as shrine guardians and pilgrimage escorts. Some may recognize you despite any disguise. Some may attempt to reach you, to save you from apparent corruption. She paused. You will need to kill them too. Cannot show mercy or hesitation, even to your sisters. Especially to your sisters. I know, I said quietly. The massacre must be total. The rejection complete. No exceptions based on personal connection or old loyalties. Covenant nodded, satisfied that I understood the full scope of what I had agreed to. Then may the Emperor grant you the strength to do what must be done, she said, the benediction sounding like curse. And may he forgive you, though I suspect he will not. The next 43 days passed in a haze of preparation and meditation. I studied the tactical information Covenant provided, memorizing the layout of Sanctus Lys and identifying optimal kill zones. Practiced with weapons I had never favored. Chain swords and flamers that would create maximum carnage and terror rather than the clean kills my blade typically delivered. The Gemini assisted without question. Their presence constant, but their silence absolute. I tried several times to speak with them, to determine whether they possessed enough autonomy to have opinions about their impending cessation, but they responded only to direct commands, offering no insight into whether they feared or accepted or simply failed to comprehend their fate. I visited Sanctus Lys once during those 43 days, traveling there anonymously to observe the preparations for the festival. The entire world had transformed into celebration. Pilgrims arriving daily to witness the anniversary of my first resurrection. Banners bearing my image hung from every building. Street preachers told and retold the story of Corellius Prime, embellishing details I barely remembered myself. I walked among them unrecognized, my armor concealed beneath pilgrim robes, and listened to their prayers. They prayed for protection, for guidance, for miracles that would save them from the galaxy's endless darkness. They prayed to me as if I could grant such requests, as if I possessed power beyond the faith they themselves provided. A child approached me in the plaza of eternal devotion, her eyes bright with excitement. "Are you here for the festival?" she asked. "To see Saint Celestine's light bless us all?" "I am," I replied, my voice steady despite the horror of what I would do to her and millions like her. "My mother says Saint Celestine is the Emperor's greatest blessing," the child continued. "That she died for us and returned because the Emperor loves us so much. When I grow up, I want to be a sister of battle. Just like her, I want to help people and be brave." I knelt to her level, studying her face and committing it to memory. That face would haunt me, if anything remained of me after what I was about to do. "Be brave," I told her. "And remember that bravery sometimes means accepting loss we cannot prevent." She nodded solemnly, not understanding but accepting the advice with childish faith. Then she ran off to rejoin her mother, leaving me kneeling in the plaza, surrounded by pilgrims who had no idea their saint planned to slaughter them in 42 days. I returned to Covenant Station and spent the remaining time in prayer. Not to the Emperor, for he did not answer, and perhaps never had, but to something, to whatever might listen in the vast indifference of the universe. Prayers for forgiveness I did not deserve. Prayers that what I did would matter, would prevent worse atrocities by ending my existence before full corruption set in. Prayers that permanent death awaited rather than some new horror I had not anticipated. The Gemini knelt with me during these prayers, their mirrored devotions, a reminder that they participated in my damnation without choice or voice. I apologized to them, though I did not know if they could understand or care. Apologized for bringing them into existence, only to extinguish them, for making them complicit in atrocity through their bound service, for never treating them as people when they might have possessed enough awareness to deserve such recognition. On the final day before the festival, Covenant provided the last piece of equipment, a modified suit of power armor, its appearance corrupted through subtle alterations that suggested chaos taint without obvious markings. Weapons that looked defiled but functioned perfectly, designed to create maximum terror when wielded against the faithful. "You will arrive during the height of the festival," Covenant explained. When the plaza is at maximum capacity and attention is focused on the ceremonial reenactment of your resurrection, the shock of your appearance will freeze them initially, providing several critical minutes before organized resistance begins. She activated a hologram showing the null field generator's positions beneath the plaza. When you have achieved sufficient casualties and rejection, you trigger this device. She indicated a detonator incorporated into the corrupted armor. The null fields activate, the warp connection severs, and you have approximately 3 minutes to reach the ritual circle before the generators burn out from the strain. 3 minutes, I repeated. To cross a plaza filled with corpses I created, while the faith that sustained me for 3 centuries drains away and leaves me mortal again. The generators will clear a path, Covenant said. Psychic pressure that drives survivors away from the ritual site. You will be alone for those final moments. Time enough to complete what you started. And if something goes wrong? I asked. If the severance fails or proves incomplete, then I activate the contingency. Covenant replied grimly. Orbital bombardment that reduces the entire plaza to molten glass. You will die either way. But if the severance fails, your death will lack the permanence we seek. You might resurrect despite our efforts, bound even more tightly to the corrupted faith generated by such a massacre. She met my gaze directly. Do not fail, Saint Celestine. Too much depends on your success for failure to be acceptable. I will not fail, I promised, though I wondered whether success and failure had any meaningful distinction in what I planned. Either way, I would be a mass murderer. Either way, tens of thousands of innocents would die. The only difference was whether their deaths purchased my permanent cessation or merely added to the weight of sin I carried into whatever came after. The final night before the festival, I experienced a vision. Not the warp-touched visions that had plagued me since my resurrections began, but something that felt like memory from a life I had not lived. I saw the Emperor as he had been before the Golden Throne, before the heresy, when he walked among humanity as its guardian and architect rather than its corpse god. And I saw him weep, not for humanity's suffering, but for the necessities his dream had created, the monsters he had made in pursuit of protecting what he loved. In that vision, I understood something I had not grasped before. The Emperor had never intended to create saints or demons or any of the warp phenomena that now defined Imperial theology. He had sought to free humanity from such powers, to build a future where belief had no supernatural consequence. His failure was not in execution, but in the impossibility of the goal itself. Faith could not be controlled or eliminated. It existed as fundamental force, shaping reality through mechanisms that transcended anyone's intentions. I was one consequence of that failure. A faithful soldier transformed into warp entity, sustained by the very belief the Emperor had hoped to render powerless. My existence was his dream's antithesis, proof that faith would always find expression regardless of architecture built to prevent it. And in destroying myself, in choosing damnation to achieve death, perhaps I served his original vision more faithfully than centuries of crusading ever had. Perhaps the greatest service a saint could offer was to demonstrate that faith's consequences should be feared rather than celebrated. The vision faded with dawn's arrival, leaving me uncertain whether I had glimpsed truth or merely constructed comfortable fiction to justify what I was about to do. But the interpretation hardly mattered. The choice was made. The plan was set. In 6 hours, I would attack Sanctus Lys and murder my way to permanent death. The Gemini stood ready, their armor polished and weapons prepared. They would fight beside me one final time, extensions of my will carrying out the massacre with mechanical efficiency. And when the null fields activated and the connections severed, they would simply cease, their brief quasi-existence ending without ceremony or acknowledgement. I am sorry, I told them one last time. Sorry you existed only to serve my damnation. They did not respond. And I chose to believe their silence was acceptance rather than incomprehension. It was a small mercy to grant myself, meaningless in the scope of what I was about to do, but necessary to maintain the composure required for the next 6 hours. Covenant appeared via hololith one final time. "Everything is ready," she said. "The festival has begun." 3.2 million souls gathered in and around the Plaza of Eternal Devotion. Optimal conditions for what you must do. She paused, and for the first time I saw something like regret in her expression. "For whatever it is worth, Saint Celestine, I believe you are making the right choice. Not a good choice, but the right one given the available alternatives. History will remember you as fallen and corrupted, but I will remember you as a soldier who chose damnation to protect the Imperium from worse corruption. History does not matter to the dead," I replied. "And memory is a curse I hope to escape permanently." The hololith deactivated, leaving me alone with the Gemini and the modified armor that would mark me as corrupted. I donned it piece by piece, feeling the subtle wrongness woven into its construction. The corruption that was cosmetic rather than real, but would serve its purpose nonetheless. When the final seal closed, when the helmet's interior displays activated showing Sanctus Lice in orbit above, I allowed myself one final moment of being Sister Celestine. Remembered the girl who had joined the Adepta Sororitas seeking purpose. The warrior who had fought for 3 centuries, believing in divine mandate. The saint who had inspired millions while losing herself piece by piece to the role they demanded she fulfill. Then I locked that memory away and became what the next 6 hours required. Not a saint, not even truly a fallen saint. Simply a weapon directed one final time, aimed at the faith that had created and sustained it, prepared to destroy itself along with everything it touched. The Gemini stood ready at my shoulders. The ship descended toward Sanctus Lice, and I prayed one last prayer to no one in particular, asking only that when this was done, when the massacre ended and the null fields severed my connection to the warp, there would be nothing left of me capable of resurrection or memory or guilt. "Let me die completely," I prayed. "Let there be no soul to judge, no consciousness to suffer, no fragment that persists beyond the final moment. Let me become nothing, and let that nothing be my only absolution." The prayer went unanswered, as all my prayers had gone unanswered. But the silence was familiar now, almost comforting in its consistency. I had never truly spoken to anything divine, only to the faith others had placed in me reflected back through the warp's mechanisms. And soon, even that false connection would end. The drop pod struck the Plaza of Eternal Devotion like the Emperor's judgment made manifest. Explosive bolts blew the entry ramp outward, and I emerged into light and celebration and the joyous faces of millions who had gathered to honor my name. They cheered when they saw me. Actually cheered, their voices rising in hymns of welcome and devotion. Banners bearing my image rippled in the artificial breeze generated by climate control systems. Children waved prayer beads. Veterans of campaigns I had led decades or centuries ago wept with joy at seeing their saint returned to bless the festival. I drew the ardent blade, and its light was wrong. Still bright, still radiant, but tinged with colors that should not exist in holy manifestation. The crowd's cheering faltered, confusion rippling through their ranks as they processed what their eyes reported but their faith could not accept. "Saint Celestine has returned!" a priest shouted from a raised platform, his augmetic voice carrying across the plaza. "The Emperor's blessing is upon us! We are saved!" I killed him first. The blade took his head before his blessing could conclude, before doubt could fully establish itself in the crowd's collective consciousness. His body fell from the platform, blood spraying across the white marble that had been consecrated in my honor. The crowd gasped, still not understanding, still believing this must be some test or trial or dramatization. Then I began the massacre in earnest. The Gemini spread to my flanks, their weapons cutting down pilgrims who stood too shocked to flee. My blade moved with the efficiency of 3 centuries' practice, each swing precise and economical. each kill adding to a tally that climbed with horrifying speed. 10 dead, 20, 50. The crowd's confusion transformed into terror as they finally accepted what their eyes showed them. Their saint had come not to bless, but to slaughter. The screaming began then, a sound that would echo in my mind for however long I had left to possess one. Millions of voices raised, not in prayer but in pure animal fear. The sound of faith shattering under the weight of betrayal too complete to rationalize away. They fled in all directions, crushing each other in their desperation to escape. But the plaza had been designed for gathering, not evacuation. The exits were too few, too narrow. They became bottlenecks where the living trampled the fallen. I pursued them through those bottlenecks, the corrupted armor marking me as fallen, the blade that had slain demons now drinking the blood of the faithful. A woman fell before me, her leg broken by the stampede, and she looked up with eyes that held no accusation, only confusion, only the desperate need to understand why this was happening. "Why?" she whispered, blood bubbling from her lips where she had bitten through her tongue. "We loved you. We prayed for you. Why?" I gave her no answer because I had none she could understand. The blade fell, and her confusion ended, but her question remained, multiplied by every kill, echoed in the faces of thousands who died, not understanding what they had done to deserve this. The Adepta Sororitas responded within 5 minutes, their training overriding the shock that paralyzed others. A squad of Celestians from the Order of the Ebon Chalice formed a defensive line across the plaza's western approach, their bolters laying down disciplined fire that forced me to adjust my angle of attack. They fought well, these sisters who had never met me but had heard the stories and believed in what I represented. I killed them all, cut through their defensive position with speed they could not match, and strength they could not counter. Their last words were prayers to the Emperor, prayers for understanding why their saint had fallen, prayers that someone would stop me before more innocents died. The Emperor did not answer their prayers. He never had, never would. Sister Superior Johanna died with my name on her lips, not as curse, but as confused plea. "Celestine," she whispered, as my blade pierced her primary heart. "Why have you forsaken us?" "I have not forsaken you," I wanted to say. "I am saving you from what I would become if I continued." But the explanation would mean nothing to her, would provide no comfort as her life drained away. So I said nothing, simply withdrew the blade and moved on to the next cluster of pilgrims, attempting to shelter in a shrine dedicated to my victories. The shrine was beautiful, its walls covered in murals depicting battles I barely remembered. Corellius Prime, rendered in gold leaf and precious stones. The Damocles Crusade, showing me radiant against Xenos' darkness. Athenos Prime before my fall there, before I learned what I truly was. The pilgrims inside had barricaded the doors, but such barriers meant nothing to someone with my strength and weapons. I burned it, stood before the shrine I had never asked for, and set it aflame with the weapons Covenant had provided. Weapons designed to look corrupted and function with devastating efficiency. The pilgrims inside screamed as fire consumed them, their prayers rising through the smoke to a god who did not intervene. The murals blackened and cracked, my golden image melting into abstract shapes that more accurately represented what I had become. An old man emerged from the flames, his robes burning, his flesh blistering, but his faith somehow intact despite everything. He reached toward me with charred hands, still seeking blessing even as I killed him, still believing I could be redeemed, or that this was all test he must endure with proper devotion. "Emperor, protect your faithful servant," he prayed as he died. "Bring our saint back to us. Drive out the darkness that has claimed her." The darkness was not something that claimed me. I wanted to tell him. The darkness was what I had always been, hidden beneath light generated by prayers like his. But he died before I could speak, and the words would have been cruelty serving no purpose beyond my own need to justify the unjustifiable. I moved through the plaza systematically, creating carnage according to the tactical plan Covenant had provided. Maximize casualties, minimize escape, ensure maximum witnesses survive to spread news of my fall across the Imperium. The math was precise, even if the execution was horror incarnate. Every corpse served a purpose, every witness contributed to the faith-breaking I needed to achieve permanent death. The Gemini fought beside me without hesitation or visible emotion, their efficiency matching my own. They killed children without pause, slaughtered the elderly and infirm without mercy, because they were extensions of my will, and my will had determined that nothing could be spared. I watched them work and wondered if somewhere in their programming they experienced anything like regret or horror. But their helms revealed nothing, and I lacked time to investigate mysteries that would cease to matter within the hour. A squad of Space Marines arrived after 20 minutes, their response time remarkable given the chaos. They were Ultramarines, their blue armor pristine, and their discipline absolute. Their sergeant assessed the situation with transhuman speed and issued orders that would have contained any normal threat effectively. But I was not a normal threat. I was a living saint, with 3 centuries of combat experience and power drawn from the faith of billions. Even corrupted, even deliberately fighting to destroy rather than protect, I remained more than any single squad could handle. The fight was brief but brutal. I killed 3 before they could fully deploy, my speed exceeding even their enhanced reaction times. The sergeant managed to wound me, his power fist connecting with my side hard enough to crack armor and rupture organs. Pain flared, genuine and intense, the first real pain I had felt in longer than I could remember. The Gemini avenged the blow, their blades taking the sergeant's head, while I recovered. The remaining Ultramarines fought with discipline that transcended their tactical disadvantage, covering each other and attempting to establish firing positions that would let them bring their full weight of fire to bear. But the plaza offered no cover sufficient against my capabilities, and one by one, they fell. The last one, a young Marine who could not have served more than a few decades, continued fighting even after losing his primary weapon. He charged me with a combat knife, screaming prayers to Guilliman and the Emperor, absolutely certain that faith would carry him to victory. It did not. My blade opened him from shoulder to hip, and he died still believing, still faithful despite all evidence that faith meant nothing in the face of sufficient power. 30 minutes into the massacre, the first picked captures began transmitting across the planet and beyond. I saw the monitoring drones hovering at the plaza's periphery, saw the servo skulls recording everything for immediate voxcast. Good. The witnesses were critical. The images of Saint Celestine slaughtering the faithful would spread faster than any official denial could contain. I positioned myself before the largest shrine, directly facing the primary recording drone, and spoke words I had prepared with Covenant. Words designed to shatter faith beyond any hope of recovery. "I am Saint Celestine," I declared, my voice amplified by the armor's voxcasters. "I am what your prayers created. I am the lie you believed, because believing was easier than accepting that the Emperor offers no salvation. For 300 years I have killed in his name, and for 300 years he has remained silent. There is no blessing, no divine mandate, only power drawn from the warp, the same warp that sustains the daemons you fear. I am your saint and your daemon both, and the only difference is the lies we tell ourselves about whose power we serve." I raised my blade toward the recording drone. "Your faith created me, your prayers sustained me, and now I show you the truth of what faith creates. Not salvation, not protection. Only monsters wearing holy faces, feeding on belief until nothing of the person remains. This is the mercy I offer you. See what I am. Reject me. Let your faith die here so that others might understand the price of worship." Then I returned to killing, knowing the words had been broadcast across the planet and would reach the wider Imperium within days. or weeks. Knowing that faith in Saint Celestine was shattering with each syllable, each corpse, each moment of horror captured and transmitted for billions to witness. 45 minutes into the massacre, the Adepta Sororitas responded in force. 3 full companies from multiple orders, coordinated through high command and supported by Imperial Guard armored divisions. They established perimeters and began evacuating survivors while laying down fire sufficient to threaten even me. I recognized faces among them. Sisters I had fought beside on Armageddon and Cadia, and a dozen other worlds whose names I had forgotten. They recognized me too. Their shock visible even through their helmets as they processed the impossible sight of their most celebrated saint turned monstrous. Sister Celestine, one of them called over open vox, her voice breaking with emotion. "Stand down. Whatever corruption has claimed you, we can help. The Emperor's mercy is infinite. Surrender and let us save you." "There is no saving this," I replied, advancing toward their position with the Gemini flanking me. "No redemption for what I have done or what I am. You should run, should flee before I kill you, as I have killed thousands today." But they did not run. They were Adepta Sororitas, and retreat was not encoded in their fundamental nature. They fought with faith and fury and desperate hope that somehow their saint could still be reached beneath the corruption. They died believing this, each one praying as my blade found them, each one certain, until their final moment, that I would return to righteousness. I hated them for that faith. Hated that they could witness everything I had done and still believe salvation was possible. Hated that their certainty forced me to destroy them when they should have recognized me as enemy beyond redemption and responded with appropriate ruthlessness. But faith does not surrender easily, and theirs persisted even as I killed them one by one. The final sister of that group was young, barely past her trials, her armor still unmarked by campaign honors. She could not have been more than 20 standard years old. A lifetime of service ahead of her if I let her live. She faced me with her bolter empty and her blade drawn, terror and faith warring in her eyes. "Run," I told her, the only mercy I could offer. "Run and tell them what you saw. Tell them their saint is fallen beyond redemption. Tell them faith is poison that creates monsters like me." "I cannot run," she replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "My duty is to fight the enemies of the Emperor, even if that enemy wears a saint's face." "Then you will die for duty," I said, and killed her quickly, cleanly, the least painful death I could grant given what she had forced me to do. 1 hour into the massacre, I felt it begin. The faith that had sustained me for 3 centuries, starting to crack under the weight of betrayal too complete to rationalize. Billions across the Imperium seeing the Pict captures, seeing their saint murdering pilgrims and desecrating shrines. Hearing my words denying the Emperor's blessing and claiming kinship with daemons. Watching me kill Adepta Sororitas while quoting scriptures of darkness. The reservoir of warp energy that kept me resurrected began to drain. Not quickly, for faith accumulated over centuries did not evaporate in mere hours. But the process had started. The Cascade Covenant predicted beginning its inexorable work. My light flickered. The radiance that had surrounded me for 300 years dimmed perceptibly, no longer burning with absolute certainty. The Gemini wavered, their forms becoming translucent at the edges as the power sustaining them weakened. They continued fighting, but I felt their confusion now, their quasi-consciousness struggling to comprehend why their existence was dissolving. "I am sorry," I told them silently, knowing they would hear through our connection. "Sorry that you existed only for this, only to participate in atrocity and then cease when I finally die as I should have died 300 years ago." They did not respond, but I felt something that might have been acceptance, or might have been merely the fading of awareness, insufficient to form complex thoughts. Either way, they fought on until they could not, until the weakening connection to the warp finally released them from binding to me. Eleanor faded first, her form dissipating mid-swing, her blade clattering to blood-stained marble without hand to wield it. Genevieve lasted 30 seconds longer, long enough to kill 3 more soldiers before she too dissolved into nothing, released from existence as casually as she had been brought into it. I stood alone then, truly alone for the first time since their manifestation years ago. The absence of their presence felt like amputation, like losing limbs I had not consciously valued until they were gone. But there was no time for grief or reflection. The tactical plan continued its progression, and I had not yet achieved sufficient casualties to guarantee complete faith collapse. 90 minutes into the massacre, the death toll exceeded 80,000. The plaza was carpeted with bodies, blood flowing in rivers that pooled in decorative fountains and stained the white marble permanently red. Survivors huddled in corners or fled through streets where Imperial forces established evacuation corridors. The entire planet had mobilized in response, military assets converging on my position with orders to destroy the fallen saint, regardless of cost. I stood at the plaza's center, surrounded by corpses of those who had loved me, and triggered the detonator Covenant had provided. The null field generators activated simultaneously, their psychic pressure slamming into reality with force that sent survivors reeling. The warp itself seemed to scream as the fields established a zone of enforced materiality, a bubble where belief had no power and faith could not manifest miracles. I felt my connection to the Reservoir Seva, felt the power that had sustained me for 3 centuries cut away like a cancerous growth. Mortality returned with shocking suddenness. My enhanced physiology remained, the augmentations the Adepta Sororitas had given me decades before my initial death. But the overlay of warp power, the resurrection capability, the light that had defined me as saint, all of it vanished in an instant of severance so complete it felt like dying without the courtesy of actual death. I fell to one knee, the weight of my armor suddenly oppressive, without supernatural strength to support it. Blood ran from my nose and ears, my body rejecting the sudden absence of energies that had become integral to my existence. Pain flared everywhere, wounds I had sustained during the massacre no longer healing at supernatural speed, no longer dismissible as irrelevant to someone who could resurrect. The null fields cleared a path as Covenant had promised, their psychic pressure driving away survivors and preventing Imperial forces from approaching. I had 3 minutes to reach the ritual circle before the generators burned out from strain. 3 minutes to cross a plaza carpeted with corpses I had created, to walk past shrines I had burned, to complete the damnation I had chosen. I forced myself to stand, to walk, each step requiring will that transcended physical capability. The path stretched before me, marked by bodies of those who had believed in me most fervently. The child I had spoken to during my reconnaissance visit lay among them, her small form broken by the stampede, her face frozen in expression of confusion rather than fear. She had not understood why the saint she worshipped would do this, had died without comprehension because comprehension was impossible when faith was so thoroughly betrayed. I walked past her, past thousands of others whose faces I had glimpsed during the slaughter. Each one was an accusation. Each one demanded explanation I could not provide. Each one represented the price of my choice to die rather than continue existing as the monster I was becoming. The ritual circle waited in the plaza's center, inscribed in stone that had been sacred before I defiled it. Covenant's handiwork, prepared weeks ago and concealed beneath decorative tiles until the null fields activated and revealed it. The circle was elegant in its simplicity. Wards and bindings designed not to contain but to prevent, to ensure that what died within its boundaries remained dead without hope of resurrection or warp-born return. I entered the circle with 1 minute remaining before the generators failed, felt the wards activate, their power pressing against me like physical weight. This was the point of absolute commitment. Once I died within these boundaries, there would be no return. No possibility of resurrection regardless of how much faith might survive the massacre. The null fields and wards combined to create a pocket of reality where death meant what it should mean, final and absolute. The device Covenant had provided waited at the circle's center. A modified bolt pistol mounted on a stand, its barrel positioned at precise height to deliver a round through my brain when triggered. Sanctified ammunition blessed by priests who had no idea what purpose their blessings would serve. The weapon of the faithful turned against their greatest symbol, appropriately ironic in its symmetry. I removed my helmet, letting it fall to blood-stained stone. The air tasted of smoke and copper and death, the scent so thick it was nearly visible. The sounds of the ongoing evacuation reached me distantly, screams and prayers and commands blending into white noise. But within the circle, there was strange peace. The calm of knowing certainty after months of terrible doubt. I positioned myself before the device, aligning my head with the barrel, my hand on the trigger mechanism. One pull, one round, one moment of pain, and then nothing. Permanent death. The ending I had been denied 300 years ago, purchased now through atrocity that would define my legacy forever. I thought of Sister Celestine, the woman I had been before resurrection. Thought of her faith, her certainty, her absolute belief that serving the Emperor meant something beyond mere function. She had been wrong, or at least incomplete in her understanding. But she had been human in ways I had long since ceased to be. Perhaps in dying, I honored her memory more faithfully than centuries of service ever had. I thought of the Emperor, distant and silent on his golden throne, wondered if he was aware of what I did, if he approved or condemned, or simply failed to notice one more death among the billions that occurred daily across his Imperium. Wondered if he too was trapped in existence beyond his choice, sustained by faith that would not release him even as it consumed everything he had been. I thought of Nadia, isolated on her distant moon, existing without purpose because death had been denied her. Wondered if my choice was cowardice disguised as courage, if accepting eternal service might be nobler than fleeing it through mass murder. But the pattern was clear. Continue and become fully the monster. The demon wearing a saint's face. Better to die while enough humanity remained to feel horror at what I had done. The null field generators began to fail, their strain exceeding design parameters. I had perhaps 10 seconds before the fields collapsed and Imperial forces could breach the circle. 10 seconds to complete what I had started or face capture, and the possibility of resurrection if any faith had survived, despite everything I had done. I pulled the trigger. The bolt round entered my skull, just above the right eye, penetrating bone and brain with the efficiency bolt rounds were designed to demonstrate. I felt it detonate inside my head, felt the shockwave liquefy brain tissue, felt everything that made me conscious begin to dissolve. There was no light this time. No vast presence reaching out to reclaim me. No voices of billions praying for my return. Only darkness and the sensation of falling. Of everything I was collapsing into nothing. I died, truly died. For the first time in 300 years. And I did not return. They ask if I was saint or daemon, if my fall was corruption or sacrifice. If I damned myself to save others or surrendered to darkness I could no longer resist. I cannot answer because I am dead, truly dead, in a way that matters. No resurrection this time, no return in glory or corruption. Just silence and the cold comfort that the warp no longer claims me. But I will tell you what I learned in those final moments as faith died and mortality returned. There is no difference between the Emperor's blessing and the Dark God's curse except the lies we tell ourselves about whose power we serve. Power from the warp is power from the warp, responding to belief without judgment about whether that belief serves light or darkness. I was Celestine. I was a saint who became a murderer to escape becoming a daemon. And perhaps I was always both, the monster and the hero inseparable because faith creates what it needs without consulting whether that creation wants to exist. The Imperium will make more like me. They will burn as I burned, serve as I served, and face the same terrible choice when they finally understand what they have become. There are no saints in the 41st millennium, only weapons that pray.